Over to you, Jana.
Thank you, Lauren. Welcome to a sponsored webinar by Goldilocks, hosted by CPA Australia, How to Get Started with AI and Predictive Planning. My name is Jana Schmitz, and I am the Technical Advisor for Assurance and Emerging Technologies at CPA Australia. Today we have people from all over the country joining us for this webinar, so welcome everyone. Before we commence, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners from around Australia and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I extend this acknowledgement to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be joining us today. It is now my pleasure to invite Oskar Sadejewski, Enterprise Account Manager, and Alex Patterson, Consultant Solution Advisory at Goldilocks. Today we will be taking questions through our Q&A box. Please direct all your questions to all panelists. We will answer your questions at the end of the webinar, and for any troubleshooting queries, please just send a message to the host using the chat box. It is now time for our session to commence, and I will hand over to Oskar and Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Appreciate it. So as Jana said, so thanks for everyone for joining us. As Jana said, with regards to the questions, it would be great to see them come in real time. A good reason for that is also that we'll be having a look at the questions, and if there's an influx of questions at a particular point in time, maybe that section of the presentation wasn't that clear, and answering that question will obviously benefit a large number of the audience. So please don't wait till the end. It just gives us an opportunity to sort of see the common questions to pick the best ones at the end of the session. So in terms of introduction, my name is Oskar Sadejewski. I work for Goldilocks and have been in the CPM space for a number of years now. Overall process improvement through technology for 12 years. And I'm joined with Alex Patterson, who is our senior consultant in solution advisory, who will be running through the more practical side of today's presentation. So look, in overall, like just to sort of address the audience, many of you as CPAs take on roles as leaders, strategists and trusted advisors for either clients or employers. And when it comes to using AI and predictive technology in general, if an organization doesn't have a starting point or someone to guide them, it can be quite daunting and seem out of reach. So as thought leaders and for process transformation and improvement, it's certainly an area where you can offer guidance and add values to these organizations. Today in the market, there's a number of offering and processes available in this space that would make it fairly simple for some organizations to get started and develop the use case, test the use case using predictive. Now, the time it takes to get to predictive may vary from organization to organization, and we'll get to why that will be later in the presentation. But all in all, vendors are offering options in this space. We'll be happy to partner with you, give you all the information you need to evaluate whether predictive will be a good fit. And best of all, the vendor will do all the technical heavy lifting in the process. So you certainly won't have to, while you have a super valid part to play in the process, you won't need to go out and finish, a postgrad in data science, majoring in R programming. So the slide here talks about, shows a little bit of a tornado, a bit of an uncertainty, and depending on how your clients were affected with the world being put into lockdown, billions of people having the way they worked, shopped, and lived turned on their head. It's either been, challenging, interesting, daunting, or for some people, like if you happen to be manufacturing sanitizer or providing teleconference software, incredibly prosperous time over the last 12 to 18 months. But look, positive or negative impact, what was common is that finance teams really had to adjust to the uncertainty affecting their entire planning, budgeting and forecasting processes. And I've spoken to organizations who had to completely revamp these processes because a lot of things they're doing in the past weren't working anymore. There was so much change and impact on revenue and cost drivers that before COVID was so predictable, unshakable, No one was just sort of expecting to live what effectively was what we saw in the movies, but that happened, and finance teams had to go back to the drawing board with budgets. Many had to, and what was being asked of them was extraordinary. Many had to sort of replicate processes that usually took 3 to 6 months. And in addition to that, leadership wanted to understand, best case, worst case, and realistic scenarios. And that didn't mean, add 10% for good, subtract 20 for your worst case scenario. The situation was too important for arbitrary calculations like that. So for many businesses, it was sink or swim, it was survival. So they really had to deep dive and start trying to predict how the disruption affected their organizations internally, but also what about their clients, their suppliers, so their external interdependencies. And time was of an essence. So there was a demand for additional speed, additional agility for organizations to keep moving their businesses forward to help them make these better decisions. And current processes just weren't scaling. And now, look, fingers crossed, while the vaccine rollouts and such are happening, and whilst hopefully again some of the worst is behind us, it's still not business as usual for a lot of organizations trying to achieve their strategic goals and bounce back in what still is a constantly changing environment for some businesses and organizations. And through predictive, it can really add a piece of capability to complement existing planning, budgeting, and forecasting processes to give you that extra view, the additional insights that you may have not had before, and unlock opportunities for businesses in these newly defined markets that they now find themselves in. Now, we talk about this slide here, maturity level. So earlier I did say, and I mentioned super briefly, that organizations might find how to incorporate predictive daunting, or don't know really where to start. And a lot of reason for this is because of where they sit in their process or technology maturity level. So, as trusted advisors, you will most likely know, where your organizations or the organizations that you deal with, where they sit, and it's important for you when looking at this kind of technology to identify, where your organization is. And the reason for that is it's not going to be a big surprise for many of you that, if you've got an organization that's dumping data out of the ERP system into a spreadsheet and running, most of their operations from manual spreadsheet processes, it's not going to get the best use of predictive, or even it's probably not going to be able to get it running in such an environment. However, the really exciting part with predictive and incorporating this kind of technology is that when you're introducing this technology into organizations, the vendors you work with, how should I put it, they set up and create an environment for predictive to work. And that usually results in significant improvements to processes through integrations and automations, and effectively the building blocks that become foundations to enable value creation through AI and predictive themselves become standalone process improvements. So again, direct integrations with ERP, creating data cubes and models that can be used then for automated reporting within the platform that the predictive has gone to work on, and so on. So it's always worth assessing on this kind of maturity curve, because there's going to be different approaches and different processes to maximize the use of predictive analytics, and also providers in the space can give you an idea of what incidental value the organizations is likely to have from introducing or discussing this type of project. So at a high level, there are usually 3 buckets organizations find themselves in, which you can kind of see on screen now. And that these buckets really affect what value they'll get from AI predictive along the journey, and how quick they'll get there. So the first bucket is really the area that can benefit from the most automation, where currently the Office of Finance might have a number of inefficient manual processes, really long budgeting cycles. They're spending way too much data, way too much time, extracting data from source systems and just formatting that data. And collaborating and sharing information within the organization is simply taking too long. And simply put, we call that spreadsheet chaos. So the road to predictive from the very beginning will save these organizations hours, days, weeks, and it adds up for some organizations, it will add up to months, which gives you time back to make informed decisions and really put that time back to get you to the next stage of the maturity level, and so on and so on. So it's almost like a reinvestment of that time. So you unlock some time and reinvest that time to get to the next level, and so on and so on. The next stage is one where you've got an organization that's really starting to get into more sophisticated integrated planning. It's trying to really truly connect the business, however, it lacks some functionality within its current systems to pull it off. So usually this kind of process is run by 30 to 50 Excel spreadsheets with multiple tabs and static data being emailed throughout the organization, awaiting understanding, completion, returning for manual consolidation. So from a technical sort of advisor point of view, it's the right idea with the wrong execution, especially in 2021. When setting up predictive to aid in forecasting, we want all the relevant information from the relevant parts of the business to be available within that platform. And it's best to do that in a way where everyone can actually work within that one platform and have their own little view of the world. Data is consolidated as it comes in. You've got workflows, sign off, and audit against that data to make sure it's accurate. But it offers another sort of level of improvement to what currently organizations are doing. So as you can see, as you move towards that introducing predictive, you keep adding capabilities. And so in the case of setting up that platform to create that common workspace, whether it's contribution from sales, HR, manufacturing arms of the business, you're creating a common single source of truth where these departments are becoming aligned, and they can actually see and be alerted to significant changes within other parts of the organization that may influence their drivers, their revenue or cost drivers, in real time. Not at the end of the month, not at the end of the quarter, in real time. And that's kind of very exciting. And as you then sort of move up the levels, adding transformational processes while sort of creating the foundations is really where the AI predictive benefits really kick in. So instead of manually preparing data as you might have previously, we've got some clients where AI and predictive outcomes drive the plans and forecasts with very little human corrections, and that's a super interesting place to be working. So this gives you a whole new view of how you can do things, what you can build, adding data, new use cases. So when you get to that final transformational layer, the way your finance teams operate is looking so much different to where you may have begun, a few months earlier. Sort of just talking about an AI or predictive project. So it's a very exciting way of looking things. And finance teams love going through this transformation. It gives them, again, a more interesting way of working, makes them a lot more creative with technology, productive, and have the ability to provide more insights to the business. So in terms of AI trends and developments, we still see a lot of movements where companies in this space are trying to get their hands on some predictive capability. And there's a number of studies in this space. One of them was Bark, which is big around the globe, specializes in planning, where 2/3 of organizations are telling us that they're looking at predictive analytics and how they can help their businesses really improve accuracy, relieve stress and time of the people involved in the planning functions, and importantly, identify better drivers. So what's actually driving value in the organizations, what metrics, what KPIs, what levers should you be focusing on to make better decisions. And there's a number of people on this call today would be super interested to, if you were asked this question, what would your answer be? Is AI something that you guys are looking at, speaking to people about, or do you sort of have a look and say, look, it's too hard and too out of reach at the moment? I love talking about this stuff, so feel free to reach out, because I like to always hear more about what's happening out there, in the real world, so to speak. So why now? And that's an important question. And I think, going back to the last 12 to 18 months, a lot has happened. So, and it's created, different needs. So first and foremost, the most obvious reason is to improve the speed of forecasting, but also not, compromise accuracy. Speed and accuracy don't usually go together. but they work beautifully together when you can get, harmony between those two elements. Accuracy in forecasting is obviously critical at the moment, because it drives all resource allocations, on the back of plans and budgets. And some organizations now have a lot less to work with, So we want to enable organizations and help them with AI, help the business, the planners, so the decision makers can make better decisions, allocate resources or reallocate resources where there are real opportunities, and capitalize on those to make sure that businesses are moving forward in the best possible way, over the next week, month, quarter, years, with minimal risk.
Sorry, Oscar. So we actually have a good example of just how dramatic the impact automation and predictive can be on forecasting. Recently, we had a customer who works in the medical sort of equipment supplying industry, and their planning process, especially the forecasting process, took a lot of time and effort, which was generally around 3 months to complete from start to finish. So a long time, every time they basically wanted to run their forecasting process. Now, using the capabilities that Oscar mentioned, they were able to actually reduce that just to 2 weeks. So you can already see a massive time savings to the business, that they could then take that time back for their staff and focus on more value-adding activities.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a clear example of when I was saying earlier, the 2 months, you can add a lot of value in analysis, saving 2 months. The next slide, we talk about smarter insights and better recommendations. So of course that's the other great benefit of why people are looking at AI and predictive, is to analyze more scenarios a lot faster. So typically organizations that do real top-down, bottom-up scenario modeling, that can take days and weeks, which is quite a long time. So what we try to provide with AI and predictive is to have that technology condense the time to do this into minutes and seconds, which then allows you to analyze multiple scenarios with larger data sets, multiple data sets, which is going to provide better recommendations on what decisions you can make. So the first example of time was having being able to be agile and make these decisions when they're needed, or having the information when they're needed. Now we're talking about time where the AI and predictive really sort of shortens calculation process, to take that human element out of it, and technology assists. So now you can actually do more with the time you have, and that obviously leads to better insights.
Yeah, so this has been a core theme of many of our customer engagements. An example that we've worked in again recently was in the childcare industry, and they were a service provider who wanted to better understand what sort of drivers were influencing occupancy, which is essentially bookings for their industry. Now, using AI driver analysis, which is a module that an example I'll be taking through in a second, they were actually able to continuously test the relationship between drivers and performance, dealing even with large data sets. And this was able to validate, and in some cases actually challenge how they understood the business, and then giving them the insight to react appropriately.
Yeah, and look, and that's a great use case. And then the other key insight is that a lot of companies spend most of their time looking at plans and forecasts at a fairly consolidated level, again, because that's only what time allows or systems allow. Say at a monthly level, where AI and predictive can really give you access to focus on things and view things more at a much granular level. So moving from a monthly view to a weekly view can really be a game changer. And then imagine from a weekly view to a daily view. It gives you a complete different scope of your business in terms of tracking performance and how quickly you can make decisions and pivot the business reacting to changing environments. Another thing is where AI and predictive do help out quite significantly, in addition to time. So now you've got some time. What do you do with that time? And a really interesting case is to include external data sources. So typically organizations because of, again, what time allows, thinks that, look, I've got all this data, I've got years and years of data, and this is what I can use to plan and forecast. Again, it's their data, and sure, it's been influenced by the environment, but organizations with AI and predictive can actually do a lot more. So whether it's including now government data, weather, temperature data, you name it, there's a lot of use cases where you can actually now combine your internal data with external data to give you, again, a totally different view and perspective on how your market's performing, identifying trends or correlations between drivers that you might not have thought about previously, because this is not an exercise normally human beings can do. So with technology, it actually helps identify and validate some drivers for organizations, and that's kind of lets them get to that next level. And we've seen a lot of examples where you can identify trends that really weren't in the picture with some companies. They weren't paying attention to it, and now it's actually helped them understand what products are going to perform, how they're going to perform, which customers might be looking to buy, and what external factors with regards to the economy or population might be influencing this.
And just to add to that, Oscar, there's so much publicly available information out there that can be used to increase planning accuracy. It'll obviously change from industry to industry, but across various use cases, there are many government, NGOs, and even paid services that publish up-to-date and reliable data. And importantly, they do so in ways that systems like Jedox can actually automatically connect to and then utilize in the planning process with little sort of human input.
Yeah, that's right. And look, again, with so much data to go through and consider, organizations don't have time or resources to normally go into these external, data sources and process these in a manual fashion. So AI and predictive are technologies that really give organizations those aha moments. Every sort of period in time or development, you have these aha moments, and this is kind of one of them, when you do start looking at data where it was unfathomable to consider, to think about bringing more data in than what you've already got to deal with. And the final thing I want to talk about is just making AI accessible for business users. So a big part of the story is how providers in the space make predictive models accessible to their business users. So one quick thing to mention is that it's important, and I alluded to this later, the answer is not organizations hiring or training up 10 data scientists to use this kind of technology to help you prepare your data and work. As we sort of head down this road and towards Alex's part of the practical presentation, it's probably a good timely to sort of say each provider's got their own approach how to solve this problem. So how to let the Office of Finance own AI and predictive technology. And each organization has got their own way. We can only kind of really show you one of these approaches, and how our platform has tried to make it very intuitive for business users to sort of utilize existing skills and really maximize what they can do with AI. But obviously, other providers will do it slightly differently. So just take ours as a representation of what's capable.
And just to add to that, this is always a really crucial consideration for our customers in basically every engagement we work on. Generally, they don't want AI to be relegated to another part of the business. They want ownership of it, and in some cases, they don't have the resources and expertise for technically complex AI predictive models. As Oscar said, I can show later how exactly we found a balance between being user-friendly and still providing sort of a valuable outcome when it comes to predictive planning.
Excellent. So look, as we start getting into Alex's part of the presentation, which is probably the good part, I like it. It's more sort of technically based, and you can kind of see what's happening. Let's have a look at what to consider before you get started. So a couple of considerations, and one of them is partnering. So as as you want to go out there and test what's really possible with predictive, how do you start? And the short answer to this is simply do a pilot. Now, before you do a pilot, there's still a couple of things to consider. And you can kind of see we've broken that down to 3 areas. The first one is choosing the right vendor and business partner. So again, they're the ones who do a lot of the heavy lifting. So when you look at a partner with a company, or when you look to partner with a company, sort of it's important to evaluate the existing customers, their references, and importantly, what are the capabilities of the software that they can provide. And that, as a reminder of that, remember that setting up predictive will result in positive ripple effects around existing processes. So it's so very importantly, you don't want to wait 6 to 12 months to get a result, and you don't want to pay millions of dollars for this either. So there has to be an element of speed in delivering this, and a low total cost of ownership, and that provides a high return during the pilot. From a people point of view, it's important to engage with people internally and get support from senior leadership, and make sure that both parts of the organization, so the end users and senior leadership are involved in the process, so they can get a bit of hands-on experience from the partner that you're working with. So rather than just starting a project, someone going away, coming back and say we're done, giving you a result that may be great, but you're going to struggle replicating internally, scaling or pivoting internally, and you'll have no visibility as to how simple or possibly technical it may have been to accomplish what they've accomplished. So it's important to be involved throughout the process, so you can really sort of learn and see how the technology works, how it functions, and when the pilot's successful, how you can then grow and take that forward. And it's super exciting. It's a super exciting field to work in. So it's a big sort of change from the everyday. I've certainly found it quite interesting, and I'm sure the next sort of iteration of FP&A, XP&A is probably something that you guys will find quite interesting too. And finally, before I hand over to Alex, throughout the project, it's important to have a view around what the scope, so a focus. What is going to be the focus of the use case that can be tested with the data available, and what success is going to look like. So what are you trying to achieve? Keep in mind that a pilot with predictive analytics is still a journey. The goal is to see initial results, but then to keep building and building and building on those results. And at a high level, we have worked with organizations that kind of go down this path of predictive, and now as they've matured, these organizations are using predictive models as their forecast now, which again is super interesting stuff and an amazing way to work. So now that we're going to get into a more technical and hands-on part of the presentation with the technology, we'll transition to why pilots are a great start and how to putting them in place, and Alex can kind of take us through how to execute them and make them successful. So I'll hand over to Alex now. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Oscar. So yeah, before we get too hands-on to the technical demonstration, just a quick note on running an AI pilot. So there are a couple of things to consider, and the next question is really, how do you get started? And generally speaking, we'd advise you consider 3 things. First, what is the use case you're going to focus on, as Oscar alluded to before? So maybe it's a specific insight you're after, or maybe it is some sort of planning efficiency, like a quicker forecast. Whatever it is, it's really important that this is well understood and agreed. And I generally advise the Goldilocks Rule when deciding on a pilot. You want to make sure that the use cases are narrow enough to accelerate the pilot, so it's quick enough, it's efficient, but broad enough to properly test the practicality of using AI in your business. You don't want to overburden a pilot just to be thorough, but also you want to make sure that you've come out of it with a good understanding of whether or not AI is right for you. Second, it's actually listed first here, is data, and data is all important. Generally speaking, the more the better, provided that it's relevant and of good quality. But it also needs to be properly structured. So you need to understand where the data is, what format it is, and what level of quality of that data is, and work through essentially what you might need to include and exclude as part of that. Now, this doesn't need to be a daunting, complex, or time-consuming process, but it's very important, and the partner or vendor that you work with will be able to guide you through this. Lastly, to run a successful AI pilot, as with any sort of pilot or project even, there needs to be an agreement to define the outcomes you're after, and importantly, how these will be specifically measured. If outcomes are vague or unrealistic, you might struggle to get the insights you're after in the required time frame. So just a note on that. Now, before I start, I've got a couple of case studies that I wanted to run you by, just to help you think about, how you could then apply the practicalities or AI, or even start a pilot at your organization. So the first is with one of our customers, Apex Hotels. Now, the challenge here was around COVID making traditional forecasting difficult, and that's going to be a sort of a common theme today. As you might imagine, the pandemic did have and is having a massive impact on the hotel industry. And one of these is making planning very difficult, as historical performance is no longer a reliable baseline for the future. So instead, Apex decided that they had to focus on external factors that could predict performance. So to do this, they implemented a driver-based forecast using predictive planning. Importantly, the drivers used in forecasting were dynamic, meaning that the system continuously learns and reweights drivers over time. This is important as the model both improves generally as well as adapts to ongoing shifts in the industry due to the pandemic. Now, this model was fully automated, and you can see generated accurate monthly forecasts. This allowed Apex with little ongoing effort to determine what were the key drivers of performance, and in turn influence these to attract more bookings. Now, another quick use case that you might be interested in. Siemens is another great example that we've worked on recently. Again, surprise, surprise, the challenge was due to the pandemic. Specifically for Siemens, this was how changes in work and culture, most notably working from home, had to leave accrual. To adjust to these changes and to ensure that the business was accurately forecasting leave, they developed a very large, complex, and even cumbersome manual model in Excel. So they did all the modeling in there. They had to pick up the data every sort of week or month and basically load it in and recalculate. Now, the model fulfilled its purpose, but it required a lot of time to load new information and manipulate data, and even more so to adjust or adapt it, say changing drivers or changing assumptions. Basically, it was time-consuming and inflexible. So to address this, Siemens actually took the logic and data within this model, and they enhanced it with AI. This meant that the model now ran with little to no manual input, and was incredibly easy to adjust and continuously adapted to new information or new data that was loaded into it. Now, AI also improved the depth and accuracy of forecasting, producing a transparent, layered, and accurate prediction of vacation use per employee. So a couple use cases just to get you to think about it. But okay, now we've got time for the demonstration. Now, just quickly, I'm going to set the scene. So first thing, I'm going to show you an example of how you can take different types of data that you might have within your business and prepare this for our AI model. This will give you insight about how you can think about the data you might have, and show you how easily it is to actually upload it and start using it. Second, I'll show you how you can configure the AI model, and what these specific changes mean, and what you can think about what might be relevant for you. And this is based on a simple wizard that comes with our AI model. So I'll be able to take you through the step-by-step process. Lastly, I'm going to demonstrate some examples for how AI can enrich planning using our inbuilt planning capabilities. This will include generating prediction, and then using this within different planning scenarios. Okay, so now it's time for the demonstration. So I'm going to quickly share my screen, and I'll be able to take you through in a second. Give me 2 seconds while I do that. Should be coming up very shortly. Please just reach out to the host if you can't see anything coming up in a second. Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to start with a data extract. to get you thinking about the data that you have. So in this case, I'm taking 5 years of sales data that you can see here. So this is actual sales data. And you can imagine this would be an extract from your ERP or point of sale system, whatever it would be for your organization. And you can see here, it's grouped in a number of columns. So you've got your reference data here, dates of transactions, this is grouped into months, and so on and so forth, including products, product groupings, and then the actual measures that are captured within the tool. So when you're looking at this data, it's important to sort of pass out what is actually useful in terms of predicting. So in this case, I've actually highlighted these in columns in green for you. So in this particular example, we're really just interested in the month. We don't need to go down to the daily level. So we're going to take these monthly values and use them within our model. Similarly, location, so store location, products. We're not too interested in the groupings yet, but we can pull those through later. And then importantly, the actual measures that we're going to be predicting. So I've already taken this and there are ways in which you can use our tool to basically automatically look at this particular extract and create a model within our tool. But I've already done that and I'll show you what that looks like now. So I'm going to jump into our modeler, which will load up in a second. And you can see we've got this AI demo database here. And we've got a number of different dimensions that align to some of those columns. The first is location. So if you recall from the extract, it had the different store locations. And you can see here, it's actually grouping them by state and city. So this is essentially how Jedox can store these libraries, lists, and structures to later use to store data against. So the important thing is you have a centralized list. So you have a centralized chart of account, centralized list of cost centers, and so on and so forth, that you can basically update and manage in the one place instead of across multiple Excel models, as you might imagine. And it's really easy to update that. So if I come into here and I want to add in a new one, say test in here, I can do that. And now that's added and available very easily through that as well. So we've got a couple here. There are a few more as well. Product dimension is another example that we pulled through, and you can see we've actually pulled through the product groupings and subgroupings there, as well as the individual product article itself. And there are a couple of dimensions that make up this particular model, but I'm actually going to show you the model itself now. So if I jump into the cube here, we've set up a sales cube with that data. If I click on this, you can see these dimensions are actually pulled in here. And you can see from the number of field cells that it's actually storing that actual data that we referenced before into this model. So this is important. So you can see within the dimensions, we've got the version. So to distinguish between the actuals and budgets and forecast scenarios and so on and so forth. Month, so that time dimension we meant that we talked about, and then these other sort of business and account dimensions that we talked to before. So that's now fully all set up within the tool. Now what I can do is, now we've got the actual data, I'm actually going to show you how easy it is to import data into this. So I've got another extract. In this case, it's our 2021 sales budget. It was previously done in Excel, but now we're going through the process of, now we're using Jedox, so we're going to upload this into Jedox and have that as a single source of truth. And you can see this is a bit more, this is at the summary level. So you can import data at the transactional level, as with the previous example, or at the summary level as well. So you can see this is grouping it by a month in this example. And you can see the two measures here, so quantity and net sales that we're interested in. So I can actually go into this particular model that I'm looking at, and I can go upload file. Now I can just browse. I'm looking for my local file system, so should come up here, and we've got our sales budget here. So I'll just open. Next. So what this is going to do is open up a wizard to actually allow me to map and then import this data into Jedox. So you can see it's pulling through a bit of a preview of the data within there. So you can see version, month, products, and our dimensions. So all I really need to do is actually just map the columns to the actual dimensions within the model. So here we're looking at version, this we're looking at month, location, and I don't need to worry about the high level ones like state or product groupings. So I can skip those, go to product, and then importantly, I need to put in my measure dimensions, so quantity and net sales in here. And that's all I need to do. So I can click next here. I can choose to run this as a one-off upload, or I can actually save it as an integrated job. And this is important because if I do that, then I can run it continuously and even schedule it automatically as well. But in this case, I'm just going to run it once and click next. And you can see that's actually uploaded, a full year's worth of data in about 1 second. So I'll click OK on that. Now, to show that, I'm going to create a view. So I'm going to go back to our start page, and I'm just going to create a view, which is an ad hoc report within Jedox, which will load up in now. So now you can see we're in the pace view here, and we've actually looked at this particular sales model here, and I'm going to start creating a view. So in this case, I'm going to put the products down in the rows here, and I can select those and make sure I'm showing the product groupings. I'm going to put the months in here, grab those into the columns, and I'll select, in this case, let's just grab a couple of years, 19 to 21, click OK. And then the others I'm just going to put in the point of view measure here, and I'm going to click paste. What this does is it pastes a view which shows me that data in the tool, and now you can see it here. And if I actually go into budget now, you'll notice that budget data has now been loaded into the tool as well, for both measures as well as net sales as well. And this is all dynamic, and this is all sort of linking to that single source of truth, that single model. Cool. So now what we're going to do is go through the process of, now that we've built this model, linking it to our AI module and using that to run a prediction. So to do that, I'm going to jump into our AI model, which I'm looking at now. And there are a couple of options that we can run through. But what we're going to be doing through today is the time series prediction. So this is the most sort of simple example, but there's a lot of other modules, and we're continuously adding to this capability. So I'm going to start with the time series prediction. So I'm going to kick off the wizard. Now, the first step is really looking at selecting the database that you're looking at. So in this case, it's already selected the database that I was looking at before. And this would show any existing sort of prediction scenarios that we've worked on previously, but in this case, it's a new model, so there's nothing there. So I'm going to go new setup. Now, what this does is it essentially reads that database and looks at the different models within there. In this one, we're just interested in sales. So I've clicked onto that. And what you'll notice is, as I click onto that, it validates whether or not this is appropriate. So it does that automatically. You don't need to test and then realize that it's not appropriate yourself. And importantly, if you see here, it actually shows the different dimensions and it links those to specific types within the AI module. So this is really important because one of the biggest challenges with running an AI project is classifying, labeling data. Whereas with Jedox, with the module, it does it automatically for you. So this is one of the ways in which we've made it sort of business user friendly. So I'm going to confirm that selection. Before I do, just a quick note here, we've got this scenario drop down here. This is important because we can run multiple scenarios and we can run them in parallel. So in this case, I'm just going to have a generic scenario for the entire model. But in some examples, you might have one type of prediction for one part of the business and another for another part of the business. Say one area is more seasonal, another is more sort of random, so you want different models predicting those two parts of the business. So that's how you can enable that. In this case, I'm going to confirm selection. What this will do is essentially create the configuration model. Now that's been done, so I can go on to the next stage. So this part is really just around calibrating what this particular model will look at. So you can see it's picked up, what the month dimension is, what the version and the measure dimensions are, and I can go through and select what we're looking at for source and target automatically, or I can actually just set defaults. as well. So I'm going to do that. And you can see it automatically selects, a 65-month time period. We're looking at actuals as a source, and then targets is a prediction as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change a couple of these values. I'm going to go instead, I'm just going to go 60 months, and I'm going to end in 2020. The end of 2020. So we're looking at a 60-month period, but then I'll add to that and retrain the model a bit later on. And we're looking at more than just quantity. What I want to do is I also want to select net sales, so we can have multiple measures being analyzed and predicted at the same time. Everything else I'll leave the same, and I'll just click next, and we'll go on to the next step of the module. So now this one is really the last step before we can actually run the prediction. This is important. It's just what's the duration and what are some of the outputs for the predictive module that we want to have. So in this case, by default, we're looking at a monthly prediction interval. It's monthly data in there, so we're not looking at daily or yearly in this case. And by default, it's like 12 months. But in this case, I actually just want to select 24 because I want to do a 2-year forecast. Now, prediction type is important here as well. By default, it's selected best. Now, I can actually select which prediction type, and this relates to specific machine learning algorithms that we can use. So you can see we've got exponential smoothing, REMA, and some other algorithms that we can utilize, and these are continuously sort of refined and added to as well. Generally speaking, I'd advise best in an AI pilot. What this does is it actually runs them through all the algorithms, and it picks the one that best fits to your historical data that you're loading in. So this is great for first starting, but should you have specific insights that would indicate that one algorithm would be better than another, you can actually go ahead and select that one yourself and save yourself some time in actually generating that prediction. Now, in terms of other outputs, I'm going to create an accuracy cube so I can measure the accuracy of that prediction. I'm not going to worry about outlier detection in this case, and I'm not going to worry about scheduling that because it's a one-off process in the example. So I'm going to click next. Okay, so now what this does is it actually pulls through. Now we've got our historical data, all 60 sort of periods of it here. And now we're in the process where I can view this. I can go back and change the settings, but in this case, I'm actually going to just save and execute this. I'll click here. So this is actually going to run the prediction. Cool. And you can see here we're now back to the start page. You can see we've got a new the scenario or the predictive scenario set up that I just created. So if we've had multiple ones here, you'd see multiple lists here. You'd be able to see what the range is, when it was last run, and actually sort of quickly view the outputs of that particular predictive process here as well. Now this has just been running in the background. I can just check on the status. That's been completed now. So now what I can do is actually have a look at how this is actually going. So I'm going to go click on the preview here. This is going to open a bit of a dialog box, in which I'll just expand up here. So it's created a prediction, and you can see it's measuring this prediction against some of that historical data. So we're looking at quantity in this case, and we're comparing against actual. But in this case, I might actually compare it against budget and see. And what you'll notice there is a pretty high level of accuracy. And you'd be surprised, generally speaking, you can achieve quite high levels of accuracy, even with an AI pilot or a simple sort of module like this. And you can see on the right-hand side, exponential smoothing was set as best fit. And you can see the performance of the other modules there as well. Now, exponential smoothing is likely in this case because it's highly geared towards seasonal historical sort of data. So if it's a seasonal industry and you want to pick up slight trends sort of year to year, it's a very good sort of algorithm for that. Cool. So yeah, so this is the output of that. And I'll just jump out of that. So yeah, so we can schedule that to run automatically, but now I actually just want to go through and and show you and how we can then take that predictive output and start using it in the planning process. So to do that, I'm going to jump back into Excel because we've got a bit of a workspace in here that's quite good for that. I'm going to jump into and create a view similar to what I did before, showing in here. So hopefully that's available for you. I'm just going to select the demo in this case, sales, and I've already got a view created, which I'll just paste here. And so that should be coming up in a second. Again, yep, it's just loading up now. So what you can see here is I've got a sort of pre-built view, and it's showing all of our products in the columns and nested in sort of each of the product groupings, so I can expand on bikes and look at the underlying sort of subgroups and even sort of underlying products. But nested next to the product hierarchy is just a handful of those version scenarios. So you can see we've got actual, budget, there's a forecast process, and then we've got the three prediction ones that we've been looking at before. So this is what has been automatically generated, and you can see it's actually automatically generated those 2 years, so 2021 to 2022, that you showed before. And I can double click on this, and you can actually see it expands out, and it'll show you that data from yearly down to the monthly level, which is quite good. And I'm just going to contract that again. Just jump out of that. Now we've created this prediction for 2022. So this was useful for 2021 because we could measure it against our current actuals and budgets, etc. But now we want to take that 2022 prediction and use it as a basis for our budget. So I'm going to expand 2022 in this example. What you can do with Jedox is then take that particular prediction and go, okay, I want to copy that and seed it as a basis for our budget. So I'm going to copy prediction, click enter, and you notice that copies it line for line at the top level, as well as down to the individual months, as well as the individual products and product groupings. And so now you've essentially got a machine-based plan or budget that's been generated very quickly and even automatically using historical data. And you can then go through the process that we call planning by exception, where you can make some sort of top-level changes to that, where I can go into a particular month and I can go, increase this by 3%. And you can start doing all of the other sort of human adjustments and inputs based on specific knowledge that you might have of the business that wouldn't show up in historical records or historical data. Cool. So I might just pause there. I'm just going to do a quick time check. We've got sort of 7 minutes left of the actual presentation. So instead, there was a little bit more I potentially wanted to show, but I might just pause there. What I did want to show was basically going through the process again of reactualizing the next 3 months of data, so loading in more actuals, and then using this for going through the same process, but using it for a forecast. But in this case, I might just wrap up and go to any questions if you've got them. But in summary, so what I've shown you today is how you can use systems like Jedox that are available in the market today to really easily manage transactional or aggregated data and load them into a tool as the basis and as the foundation for predictive planning. Now, this can be easily uploaded, easily imported, and we've essentially already within our tool, we've got an inbuilt integrator that can automate this, so you're not having to do some of these manual processes that I showed. And then finally, once the data is available, you've got the models in there, it's really easy to actually start using our AI model. And there are options available in the market today that are as easy and as business friendly as what you've just seen today. We can actually start using predictive and start addressing some of these challenges that Oscar mentioned quickly. So in that, I'm just going to stop sharing. We'll jump back into the slide deck, and I think we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Alex and Oscar. That was amazing. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure so did the audience. Now we only have 5 minutes left, and we haven't received many questions from the audience yet. So I would like to make use of the time and pose some of my own questions, if you don't mind, and then that might trigger one or two questions from the audience. So I believe it was you, Oscar, who mentioned setting up AI functionality earlier and that it brings other process improvements. Could you just go through some of those other improvements a bit more? Is it a very disruptive process?
Cool question. Look, in the time I have, yeah, happy to go through that. So, what's the best way to look at it? Okay, so AI and predictive are part of a larger platform. So, just think of a car and the evolution of technology in a car, just as an analogy. So, we've got anti-collision now in cars. That's a technology, but does that have anything from getting to A to B? Not really, because that's the primary function of a car. So AI and predictive in planning, budgeting, forecasting, scenario modeling is like a next evolution of technology within an existing budgeting, planning platform. So it already had some functionality and it offered process improvements being introduced to organizations, with now, okay, what's the next iteration? What's the next step? Well, now we can, now we've got AI and predictive models and wizards that we can, overlay on existing processes to even, reduce time. So even where some processes were automated for users, now you've got AI actually automating what was already automated, if that makes sense. So what I mentioned earlier, that I guess sort of at a high level, it's about creating a single source of truth for the organization. So again, AI and predictive use data. So to have that data in a single source, it naturally and inherently creates a single source of truth that the organization is tapped into and contributing to. And so when the organization is contributing to that single source of truth, you can imagine that those, during budgets, why is a budget process 6 to 12 months or 3 to 6 months? Well, it's because of the manual processes involved, sending out templates, getting them back, fielding questions, consolidating, that collaboration within business. Like when you're creating, when you sort of set up an AI or predictive function in an organization, you're already creating a platform where now suddenly people kind of work within that platform, and the Office of Finance suddenly has visibility. So when you are asking for these bottom-up inputs, for example, you've got visibility over, who started their budget, who's completed it. Rather than emailing it out, you just get an email alert saying, so-and-so has submitted their budget. Can you review it? Can you sign it off? Also having your data, within these cubes and set up, you're no longer bound by your GL structures. So, a lot of ERPs allow for reporting, automated reporting, but it's within the bounds of a GL. When you put your data into, a platform like Jedox, you're unbound. You can start reporting on ad hoc reports or reporting in a way where it's as if you've got multiple GL structures, fit for purpose for either analytics or KPIs for a specific part of the business, whereas you've only normally got one GL structure that, it's either for statutory reporting or reporting back up to, to maybe, if you're a multinational, to the larger organization, and everything in the middle needs to be automated. Now, when you're setting up the data, like in the platform for Jedox, you kind of inherently unlock all these other abilities. And is it disruptive? With 1 minute to go, certainly not. It does require input, right? But here's the cool part. Organizations, and this is kind of why, again, going back to what I said about choosing the right partner, the right approach, we feel, is just to think big but start small. So, start by automating some of your spreadsheet hell. And then, you find some time. And then I was talking about reinvesting that time to get to the next level. So effectively, you're on a transformational journey where it's not disruptive, because every stage should unlock a little bit more time for you to spend on the next stage. and that's how it doesn't become disruptive. So you would say on the first stage, yes, you would need to put a little bit of input to unlock that time, but then it's this beautiful flow-on effect where you actually unlock time to improve more and more of processes. So if hopefully that answers your question. It's once you kind of get going, it's actually beautiful. It just works.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Oscar. I'm aware of time. I just picked up one question from Joe Jiao. I apologize if I mispronounce your name, who is a graduate accountant and asks whether you can please recommend some software or fields that help to further explore the AI or predictive planning space.
Absolutely. So look, with a minute, with probably zero time left, I do deal with this field. So look, I didn't give any contact details at the start, but my name, Oscar Tsiliovsky, that's how it's spelled. I'm on LinkedIn. If you needed any more resources, white papers, wanted to have a chat about AI, wanted to pick my brain, please feel free to connect. Don't be shy. I love this kind of stuff. I love technology. I've been working in the space for ages. So I can certainly, give you some recommendations and sort of share with you whatever I know.
Fantastic. I encourage everyone to reach out to Oscar and Alex on LinkedIn. And we are coming to an end now of this webinar. Thank you so much, Oscar and Alex, and I'll hand over to Lauren.
Thank you, Jana, Oscar, and Alex, and thank you everyone for your participation. In the next 3 working days, you'll receive an evaluation survey accompanied by the recording of this webinar. We really appreciate your feedback as it's extremely valuable to CPA Australia to help us deliver better events for you. Thanks again, and we look forward to welcoming you to another CPA Australia webinar soon.
Thank you.